It's time for Live on Lanier. Welcome to Live on Lanier, a monthly podcast brought to you by the Lake Lanier Association. This month, we'll start off talking with LLA board member Glenn Martin of Martin Docks. Glenn is a third-generation dock builder here on the lake, whose family's legacy goes all the way back to the formation of the original Lake Lanier Association. We'll follow that up with LLA board member and treasurer Jim Bailey. Jim is here to demonstrate the fiduciary responsibility that LLA employs with all donations, membership fees, and grants we receive. Jim asked me to include a warning that no one should operate heavy equipment, fly an airplane, drive a boat or car, or any other type of alert activity while listening to his segment, as the financial reporting world is known to cause excessive drowsiness. All kidding aside, Jim does an amazing job in overseeing all the financial and accounting aspects of the Lake Lanier Association, and we appreciate his coming on the show to explain how it all works. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends and neighbors who have an interest in Lake Lanier. If you'd like more information on how to join the Lake Lanier Association, take a moment to scan the code on your screen. With all of our upcoming plans and programs, there's no better time to join and be on board for all of 2024. So please scan the code or check us out at lakelanier.org. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be right back with Live on Lanier, brought to you by the Lake Lanier Association.
A full Lake Lanier is important and vital to the 5 million people who rely on it for drinking water. Lake Lanier Association's advocacy with the Corps of Engineers and city, county, and state relationships, along with our initiatives like RIPRAP, protect and maintain the unique island shoreline of Lake Lanier. Learn more about the work of the Lake Lanier Association or how to become a member, a volunteer, or to donate at lakelanier.org.
Well, welcome to this month's episode of Live on Lanier. Very excited about our first guest here, Glenn Martin from Martin Docks. Glenn, thanks for coming in and joining us.
It's great to be here. Such an honor.
I love yours and your family's history on the lake. Let's start talking about the family's history on the lake and the association with the Lake Lanier Association right out of the gate.
Wow, it's a long history. So my grandfather, G.H. Martin, mostly known in the community, built the first private dock on Lake Lanier back all the way in 1956 for Hall County icon J.D. Jewell.
How about that?
Oddly enough, that dock is still in service on Lake Lanier.
I wouldn't say oddly enough. I'm a fan of Martin Docks.
When people ask us how long the dock lasts, we say we don't know. The first one we built is still working. From there, it developed into a business. My grandfather was a welder by trade. That's how that relationship started. And once he built the first dock, then he built the next ones for the next people and so on. Well, in the 60s, how we kind of got started with the Lake Lanier Association, in the 60s, our wonderful U.S. Army Corps of Engineer government decided that they would do an impact study on the lake to determine what the impact of having recreational docks on the lake was going to be. Now, this study had no timelines, no budget, no anything. It was just, we're not going to allow any more docks until we complete this study.
Sounds like the Corps.
Well, obviously, for my grandfather who had started a business and some other business owners around the lake and property owners, that was upsetting. You can't have a dock, you can't use the lake, and that kind of stuff. So they went and they fought with Washington and the Corps and all this. And finally, the government did away with that study and said, okay, we're going to continue to let you have these things. Well, from that, they decided that with different property owners got together and said, we need to have a united voice. Because stuff like this is going to continue to happen, and we need to be together in one organization. We need to be together. So they formed what was called then the Lake Lanier Property Owners Association. So you had to own property around the lake to actually be there, and the meetings were hosted at our office.
How about that?
On Highway. So the meetings were hosted there. My grandfather served as president for many, many years, well into the 70s. Until the association morphed into what it is today, the regular Lake Lanier Association, where you don't have to own property to be a member, but you still get all the great benefits.
That's terrific. And that whole history, especially the first dock ever built on the lake, is still out on the lake.
Still out on
cool.
the lake.
I don't care who you are. That's just cool.
It is kind of cool. We've actually tried to buy it a few times and they won't sell it to us.
understand that. Well, have you ever just thought about how many Martin docks there are on the lake? I mean, is there a wild guess number out there?
We get asked that from time to time. It's definitely in the thousands, but it's not excessive. If I were to guess, still left on the lake, it's probably 3,000 to 4,000.
Gotcha. Well, before we move off of the dock company conversation, I've said this many times, and I'd like to reiterate it for a couple of reasons now. As you know, in my past, I was in the dock building world on the float side.
Absolutely.
And also on the marina side.
Yes,
kind of got to play in some big places in
Yes,
those
you
days.
did.
It was a lot of fun.
Right.
But I will take it to my grave. I had met every dock builder this side of the Mississippi, south of the Midwest. I mean, I just had a chance to meet every one of them.
Right.
It took about 7 years to get it done, but I did. And I would hold that 3 or 4 of the most premier dock companies on the planet are right here on Lake Lanier.
That is absolutely true. And of course, we're prejudiced. I'm prejudiced to Martin Docks and think that we're the best.
Sure.
And arguably we might be, but there are so many quality dock builders here in the Southeast and especially on Lake Lanier.
Well, and I have a really special reason for bringing that up, in that we work year-round as the Lake Lanier Association to help keep the lake clean.
Yes,
and Shore Sweep is one of our biggest events every year, and floats are one of the biggest problems on the lake every year.
They are a big problem.
And I maintain, if you'll pick those premier dock companies that have a relationship with the Lake Lanier Association,
Right.
as Martin Docks does here sitting today, that will greatly reduce the opportunity for phantom floats to end up all over the place, besides all of the metal and aluminum that's not properly tended to. When an old dock goes away, it's going to go somewhere.
Most of what we do during Shore Sweep is stuff that should have been done when the job was completed. It's
Right.
not very often that it's actually storms that wash floats out from under docks and up against the bank. It's typically they were abandoned.
And we are blessed to have those premier companies on the lake, and you'll see them participating in Shore Sweep.
Yes,
I know you guys have been participating in Shore Sweep every year since it started.
Well, do you know how it started?
I do not. Let's hear that story.
All
That's
right.
fun.
So the association actually came to Martin Docks, and when my dad was running it at the time, this would have been the early 90s, and said, hey, we want to get an event together to, pick up floats around the lake or whatever. But they didn't really know how to get it started, and, it wasn't what we have now. So we didn't have equipment companies. We didn't have all these, hundreds and thousands of volunteers and stuff like that. So it was, let's pick a day and we'll get some volunteers involved. So they got some volunteers involved. Well, what happens, they took them to parks. Well, Martin Docks was the only company involved at that time. And so we, as Martin Docks, actually picked up all the floats from every location all around the lake and hauled them all off and donated all the money it took to do all of that.
Really?
And so it wasn't until, actually for the first several years, we did the lion's share of the float moving. Now there was still tons of volunteers even right off the bat on the lake that brought floats in with their boats and stuff like that. But there wasn't a lot of businesses involved in the first few years. So we primarily hauled almost all the floats from the wherever location it was, whatever park it was, to a central location down at Met Park one year and other years, and started putting them into trash cans at that point. So, yeah, so since the very, very beginning, we've been involved in it.
It's one of the things I love about your family story and history is it's not just a dock company that's trying to make their profit, which is fair and
Sure,
ought to be
business.
doing that. But Grandpa and Dad, and now here you sit, have been involved in this from the get-go.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you were born and raised in this business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was born, raised, lifelong resident of Hall County. Been on the lake since, probably since I was born. I know my parents have a picture of me driving one of the boats when I was not even 18 months old. Huge grin, just love the water, love to be on it. And so, honestly,
as every kid should be raised.
this was kind of pre-child labor laws and stuff. So I was working on docks when I was a kid.
It doesn't count when your last name matches. You can do whatever you want.
That's exactly right. So, I learned from a very young age. And then as I got to be a teenager and on into my adult life, took a more active role all the way up into I bought the company outright in 2004.
Oh,
So
great. Well,
yeah,
congratulations.
it's been a long time.
And it continues to roll right along, expanding
Absolutely.
a little bit every
Absolutely.
year.
Yes, we've got offices all over the place and serve almost all of the Southeast now.
And one of the really cool things is you guys build your docks right here at Lake Lanier.
We sure do. It doesn't matter where the dock's going. It could be going, we've got one going up to Kentucky, we've got some in Tennessee, and obviously in South Carolina quite often, and they're all still built right here in Hall County.
That's too cool. Too cool. So with all of that, you've had a long-term relationship with the Corps of Engineers.
Absolutely.
And we want to, we don't want to do any of the bad side of it, but there's a lot of good sides.
Sure.
using a professional dock company that has a long-standing relationship with the Corps when you've got issues trying to get your own stuff done at your own personal dock.
Right. Well, it's kind of scary for a lot of permit holders, and you guys out there will understand that. You're dealing with the agency that is going to either give you a dock or not give you a dock, and so people are kind of apprehensive about it. I just went and renewed my passport again, and there was a lot of documentation, but it pales in comparison to what they asked for to get a dock permit when you live on the water. So there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of stuff, and so we routinely walk through with our customers. Here's the requirements that the Corps has. Here's the paperwork that you're going to need to present to them. If you'll do it all in this order and you provide it on these formats, then that will help your permit go a little bit smoother. And we do that, obviously mostly here on Lanier since we're based here, but we do that for all the different lakes. And the Corps' paperwork from lake to lake is almost identical. A lot of the forms match because it is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Sure. It's interesting how their paperwork is identical, but the implementation of the rules and regulations vary across county lines.
They do. And the rule book for each different body of water is going to be slightly different. So they have rules that are the same no matter which lake you are in the United States, but then they have project-specific rules. So you can be allowed to do things on Lanier that you can't do on Lake Hartwell, for instance, and vice versa. So some of the rules are a little bit different.
Well, one of the things we're talking a lot about is the potential upcoming shoreline management plan.
Oh, I'm very excited about that.
We're hoping to help make happen, and the Lake Lanier Association is going to be knee-deep in it. Now, you talked about the experience your family had having to go all the way to Washington to get someone's attention when the first one happened. It hasn't been updated. I was actually on the last time it was updated.
That's 2004.
That's been quite a while.
20 years already.
20 years ago already.
Yeah.
So for people out there that want to be sure to have input on the shoreline management plan, the Lake Lanier Association is a great way to make sure your voice gets heard.
Well, it's going to be a fundamental part, or at least we believe it's going to be a fundamental part of the new shoreline management plan. So this is the one time in what's now been decades that we as property owners, as people who are on the lake, get a voice and get a say into how the rules are going to be determined, how the rules are going to be enforced, what changes need to be made. And so because this doesn't come up very often, it doesn't really change with the times or with the speed of the way society or technology may change. This is the one time that we have the ability to have a say. And so the Lake Lanier Association is going to do a huge survey. We're going to try to get all of our membership involved and be really involved with the Corps to help this process go along. But I'm excited for some of the changes that could actually take place since it's been 2 decades now.
I appreciate that input. And as we're videoing this today, there's actually a winter storm brewing all around us.
Yes.
But I swear spring is right around the corner.
Right around a couple of weeks ago, it was spring.
It was.
Everybody all excited, and then here comes winter right again. That's
we took Pop to Amicalola. We took advantage of it today.
Right.
But we would be remiss having your expertise here to not ask for at least 1 or 2 tips for what we should be looking for when we're heading down to those docks, getting ready for a safe summer.
Sure. Well, spring is right around the corner. The warm weather, people are going to get excited. They're going to want to go out. They're going to want to deal with their boats and their docks and play on the water. And, these kids, especially these teenagers, they'll be in the water in another month. I'll have to wait a little longer myself. But, it's great every year to do a thorough dock inspection, whether you hire professionals such as ourselves or any of the other companies, or you just do it yourself. Check your anchoring system, make sure all of your attachment points are not frayed, you're not having cable issues, that your dock is secure, whatever your walkway is sitting on, whether you have shoreline steps or it's sitting on the bank, that make sure that you don't have undermined banks that the walkway could fall when it starts to get people on it, because you haven't used the dock likely in several months, and so there can be some things that you haven't noticed. I highly recommend, even though the Corps doesn't require it, I recommend that you have an electrical inspection of your dock every single year. The electrical on your dock is not like what's on your house. The dock is in motion all the time. So where there's electrical connections, the dock is moving, and so you can have frayed wires. Maybe a storm has come through and dislodged your dock from its location, and you haven't had the electrical redone or checked since then. It could be wiring between your house and the dock that maybe an animal has burrowed under there, or a tree has fallen over and a root has pulled something loose. So with all the safety that goes around with electrical, being near the water and, some of the tragedies and accidents that we've seen happen, I highly recommend you get that inspected. And the dock, as far as it goes, your hinge points, where your walkway connects to your dock and where the walkway sits on the land, and the anchoring system, whether that be poles on the corner of the dock or cables going out to the shore, those are your key points. So always have those inspected every year, especially in the spring right before you start using it. Boat lifts or jet ski ports or any of those kind of things are also something else you'd want to take a look at and make sure those are in good operation.
Those are all terrific tips, and I love the idea of having annual inspections, particularly in regards to the electrical safety. You can have an intermittent problem and not know it until something goes really wrong.
And unfortunately, people find this out the hard way.
Right.
And, that can have catastrophic consequences. We don't want to see that.
Well, Glenn, we appreciate your coming and joining us. Congratulations on your family's long-standing successes here on Lake Lanier, and thank you for your family's long-going participation.
Kirby, I
everything going on
I appreciate our relationship and the invite to come in here. It's been great, and I'm excited to work with the association going forward this year and sitting on the board and seeing what all we can accomplish.
I don't think we said at the outset, but you are a board of director member here of the Lake Lanier Association.
They lost their mind. They let me on the board last year. So, I'm happy to continue our family's legacy with the LLA and, see what all the great things we can do to keep the lake safe and full and clean.
We got another great safe summer coming right up, don't we?
Yes,
okay.
We do.
Well, thanks for joining us, Glenn.
Thanks,
Have
Kirby.
a great day. We'll be right back after this.
All right.
Lake Lanier Association's initiative for a clean lake preserves and protects Lake Lanier for everyone with programming and education resources like our annual shore sweep cleanup, our Adopt a Lake water testing program, erosion and sedimentation monitoring, abandoned dock and boat removal, and our Clean Lake Pledge. Learn more about the work of the Lake Lanier Association or how to become a member, a volunteer, or to donate at lakelanier.org.
Well, welcome back, and I'm really happy to welcome our treasurer, Mr. Jim Bailey, to join us on the second half of our program today. Jim, how are you?
Great. Thank you, Kirby.
Appreciate your coming in. Thanks very much.
You bet.
Let's talk a little bit about your personal experience on Lake Lanier before we dive into the treasury side, which I'm really looking forward to. But you're kind of a unique cat in that you've actually witnessed and seen every mile of shoreline on all of Lake Lanier.
Yes, I bought my house on Lake Lanier about 9 years ago, right before I retired from full-time employment. And we went on a mission to view every mile of shoreline. Now, when you put that in practical terms and you're in a boat going about 5 to 10 miles an hour, viewing docks and homes and things, it took about a 6-month period, 2 or 3 times a week. But we saw the whole lake. And in addition to that, we have eaten at least once at every restaurant on the lake.
Now, I can match you on that one, I'm proud to say.
All right.
More than once, actually, in almost all of them. But that's really cool. And actually, it lends right to the thoroughness that you bring to taking care of the books, taking care of the money for the Lake Lanier Association. But before we jump into that, you've got some grandkids that have a good time on the lake too, right?
That's correct. My grandkids like, obviously, swimming. And whomever invented the lily pad, a piece of foam with a rope on it, I hope they're a multimillionaire. That is a marvelous but simple invention.
Yep.
And they like being pulled behind the boat, tubing I call it, but being pulled behind the boat. And then they have gotten into fishing, surprisingly enough, and do real well at it, except I still have to bait the hooks and I have to take the hook off the fish before we release it. But they actually enjoy fishing.
So, Grandpas, they're supposed to be able to bait the hook and, more importantly, take the fish off at the end.
That's correct.
That's part of the fun of it all. And from your professional history, we're not going to dive into details, but you've got 40 years with Fortune 500 companies in the aerospace sector, playing at some pretty high levels. It's a very impressive resume. We're really glad to have you as our treasurer here with the board.
Thank you.
It's very, very much so. And also a heart for service. I mean, this isn't the only not-for-profit you have been or are involved with.
That's correct. That's correct. I've actually been on the board with 4 nonprofits to this point, 3 of them as treasurer. And the beauty of it is they've spanned a variety of types of organizations, performing arts, visual arts, education. And I sort of view Lake Lanier as environmental in a global sense. So I've sort of spanned across some real interesting aspects of the nonprofit world.
That's really cool. Rotary Club is one of my favorite clubs on the planet. No surprise at all you're involved with them, but also we'll mention the Holiday Theater there in Delano.
That's correct. The Holiday Theater.
Yeah.
Right. I worked with them and just really enjoyed my tenure there.
And if he looks a little bit familiar, you may have seen him on stage a time there or so, right?
Well, I don't generally advertise that. I usually, if people say, "Didn't I see you at the Holly?" I said, "Did you enjoy the show?" If the answer is yes, they saw me.
There you go. There you go. Well, all of that leads to your position as treasurer of the Lake Lanier Association. And one of the reasons I ask you to be with us here today is I have just an incredibly high level of confidence that every penny is accounted for in the professional right way. But me sitting here saying that all day doesn't really mean a whole lot. You're the guy that's actually doing it. I'm the guy that gets to see your reports. But we wanted to introduce you to the membership and give them a little bit of an idea of how seriously you take this job, which we greatly appreciate, and how the Lake Lanier Association is organized so that people can have confidence when they participate either in a donation or in a membership that the right things are happening with their money.
Sure. And let me give you a background, and this is obvious, but Lake Lanier is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are registered with the IRS. Now, the fact that we are a nonprofit, our financials are actually public information. So if anyone wanted to look at the financials, they can go to the IRS.gov website, sort of navigate through to the nonprofit section. And actually, it's a tax-exempt organization search. You can go in there and you can find a history of our financials there. But it is a matter of public record. And mentioning that, we are also registered and licensed with the state as a charity or a nonprofit. And you can go to the Secretary of State website, and on the Secretary of State are all our filings with the state. And actually, the state side is good because it gives all the history of the organization back to the Articles of Incorporation and the original establishment of the business here in the state of Georgia. But our information is public. So it's available for anyone to see. Now, we do publish a sort of an annual report, if you will, that'll be going out shortly. But if you really wanted to see the hard numbers for sure, they're on the government databases.
And there's actually a professional team that on a monthly basis is going over with the fine-tooth comb, making everything meets the proper criteria, along with an annual audit.
You're correct. The way every month, within a week of the end of the prior month, the Finance Committee meets. And the Finance Committee consists of myself as chair, Victoria Clevenger, our executive director, is on the executive committee. And we also have Lacey and Lane there, who are respectively bookkeeping and payroll for us. And usually we're using Administrative Solutions Group as our service provider. The owner of the business is there. We get a report in advance, we meaning Victoria and I and the others, and it is the preliminary report which gives us a chance to look at how the data looks before we go into the meeting. Once we get into the meeting, then basically we go line by line through every transaction. And what we're looking for is, do we have the source documentation? Do we have the proper approval? Is it categorized right from a bookkeeping standpoint? Did we put it in the right place? And once we're all satisfied that we've got all the records accurate, then we save that data. Now, once the books are closed for the month, then we get a report that's basically a balance sheet, and that's just a list of your assets and liabilities. And we get another report. It's called a profit and loss. Now, we're a nonprofit, but it's called profit and loss. And the profit and loss just tells you all your revenue for the month and the source, the individual sources of that revenue, and then all the expenses by type. In addition to that is attached what we call a transaction detail. Because if you saw something on there and you said, oh, I saw where we spent, some amount of money on some particular item or type of expense, what was that? You go to the transaction detail and it will have a list of everything that makes that number up, and it will have details of who it was or what business it was, what, the nature of it was, and so you can sort of see what makes that up. I then take that report and put it into a general report that I compose that says, here's how the month went, and here's the numbers. And it's sort of words and pictures, if you will. There's some charts and graphs. You've seen it. Mm-hmm. And that package of my report, as well as the actual accounting data, then gets distributed to the full board in advance of the board meeting. Mm-hmm. Then when we come to the board meeting, I'm on the agenda, and we go up and we go over the data that's in that package. So that sort of describes in a top level how the process works.
Sure. And one of the elements I love about it is the multiple professional eyes that are on that report before it even gets in front of the board of directors. You know, when you're running the trouble is when one person has a chance to manipulate. And because we've got this whole system built the way you designed it, there's no one person that could do anything that somebody else's eyes wouldn't catch.
No, there are at least 4 people that look at every transaction. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty well audited and self-audited in that sense. You alluded to, we do go to an outside
correct
CPA firm, and we get an annual audit. And what that auditor is looking for is, are we complying with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP rules, we call them, and do we have source documentation? He's just looking, did everything get done right and correctly? And I will say, sometimes out of the audit, the auditor may spot something. This expense you had, $1,000 in general expense, that really should have went in a capital expense. We'll evaluate that and take any appropriate corrective action. But we do have an outside audit agency that goes through our books at the end of the year. And we provide them all the source documentation, access to all our bank records, and all of that gets then audited back to the accounting.
And then that outside auditing agency actually comes and does a presentation to the board of directors, so the entire board has the opportunity to hear what they're saying.
That's correct. It's a presentation to the full board when his review is complete.
It's a very, very time-consuming and impressive cycle. But again, what it really reiterates to me, and I'm an old budget guy, and in my past worlds, we lived and died by very detail-oriented budgets, and I would hold ours up to anybody. The point of the matter is everything is accounted for properly, and when it's done right.
That's our goal. And I think based on, and I think you've sat through a couple of the audit reviews, the auditor, that's his job, is to make sure that's being done. And I think we got an especially good acclamation from him last year about the way the books had been kept for that year. For 2023.
Right.
2024 is still, we're closing those books out.
You mentioned earlier there's a difference between our normal operation expenses and capital expenses. For example, Project Armor, that's an ongoing situation we have right now. There's a lot of money involved in it.
Yes.
The Project Armor money comes from donations from individual members. We have a Fund a Foot program going on. As a matter of fact, open your most recent Lakeside on Lanier. It'll give you an opportunity to scan and go take a look at that. We're very excited about it. The Lake Lanier Association had already done a mile of shoreline in the past. The current Project Armor is targeted to get done a mile addition to that. We're not all the way funded for that, but if somebody's interested and they donate to Project Armor, that money is handled directly into that specific area.
Thank you. You're a great lead-in guy. You put a visual up there on camera. So I hope you know you opened the door to me.
Have at it.
Project Armor is a good example. Project Armor is about a $600,000 project. And it had, I know Skip talked about this, but it had its genesis several years ago in a survey of erosion to identify the worst case scenarios. The top 16 were identified, and that's what's being remediated at this point. From a financial standpoint, I get interested. So how much money is available to do it? Well, first of all, how much is it going to cost in total? How much is available to do it? And how much have we spent? And how are we doing to budget? So I created sort of and I know this is going to look busy up there, but a sort of at a glance chart that depicts all that information. This is project status. This is how much we've got. This is what we need to raise some money for. This is the to go. And here's the cumulative budget that's associated with the completion of each project. And that way we can sort of see how are the projects doing to budget, how are we doing overall to budget, and what is our funding shortfall. So I produce this document, and it gets distributed to the board on a monthly basis.
Sure. The bulk of that money comes from the participating counties that are on Lake Lanier. We get a tremendous amount of support from them. Of course, they're helping protect the shorelines, which is what Project Armor is all about. Riprapping islands that are in risk of deteriorating to the point that they're gone. We've all seen it happen. We're trying to prevent it from happening to other islands, but we want to be sure to thank those counties that are participating with us.
That's correct. The major bordering counties are Hall, Forsyth, Gwinnett, and Dawson, and all of those counties made a commitment to us this year and followed through on that commitment. Now, Project Armor spans the lake because these projects are spread out. So all of the counties sort of had an interest in the portion that was going to directly affect them from an erosion and sedimentation standpoint. But all of them were very generous in recognizing the value of protecting the shoreline and contributing to that effort.
And we greatly appreciate that. And something else, Skip had previously done an interview regarding Project Armor. He's our board member that's heading it up. But something I would like a chance just to reiterate one more time. You guys organized it. I sat through the meetings. This process was as above board as anything you've ever seen. They went through and did the surveys. Everybody that wanted to have an opportunity to bid on actually doing the installations had a chance to bid it. We went with the best price with some highly skilled professional folks that are headquartered right here on Lake Lanier. It was as professionally run of a bidding process as I've ever seen a not-for-profit do.
Right. And on my end, on the financial end, what I'm doing now, there's really three elements. There is the actual installation of the rock, but there is the supply of the rock, there's the hauling of the rock, and the installation of the rock. So there's three distinct portions of this particular effort. And I track, first of all, I know what the quoted and budgeted portion for all of that was by project, and I track what it actually came in at. Is it overrunning, underrunning? How are we doing? Right now we're doing really well, but I take an interest in how is that project doing to its quoted value, and everything is actually doing real well at this point.
That's terrific. And we started the conversation with, so we have these capital projects. We've got our navigation beacons and shore sweep and other things that are in one bucket. We've got a whole nother operations bucket that we particularly rely on memberships to help support. That's the ongoing operations, which, by the way, if there were no Lake Lanier Association, none of these islands would be getting taken care of, most likely. Somebody had to step up and be the administrator and the point person. But when it looks like we have this huge budget that we're dealing with, really the majority of that budget is done in projects. And we still have our ongoing expenses because we have paid professionals that help keep this organization on the up and going.
Right. I want to come back and sort of amplify something you said, but I will tell you, when we look back at 2024, 70% of our expenditures went to the projects. And then we had about 22% in administrative and overhead. We had a little bit of fundraising, and there's 6% I think was fundraising. And then capital investment, I have to fess up and tell you, was 3% because this nice office, we finished it up last year. So
Amen.
There was a little bit of money that had to go into that. But we've been talking about Project Armor, but like the lighted navigational beacons that are out there, we spend about $20,000 a year on maintenance and on continually adding those. So that's a significant contribution that the association and its members make to the lake.
Life jacket loaner stations.
Life jacket loaner station. Again, that effort is a great one that people can come to the lake, and if they don't have a life jacket, take one and borrow it, put it back up. We're good to go. And I particularly enjoy it when I go to one of the parks and, there's young children there and people, and maybe, hey, I get it. A life vest is expensive. If you're not going to use it a lot, hey, just go get one at the lake and enjoy the lake. So that I think is pretty good. Another one that I like to talk about is the abandoned docks and derelict vehicles.
Sure.
And
derelict vessels.
That's correct. A half-sunk boat, a dock that washes ashore somewhere. Surprisingly enough, it's very hard to identify where that came from. So identifying ownership, trying to hold them financially accountable is extremely difficult. We end up usually just having to dispose of those things. And it's very expensive to dispose to, particularly if you've got a boat that's partially submerged, to get it up, get it to a place where you can get it out of the water and then dispose of it. That's pretty expensive. But we do provide that service. So that to me is one of our really good service avenues is making sure we can deal with those issues.
Well, and as with all of our board members, you and I are volunteers. These are things of passion that we feel very strongly about because we love Lake Lanier. And all of the projects, big money, all of that gets spent. But at the end of the day, we're really membership driven. The reason the doors are open, the reason we're able to maintain and manage these projects is because of the members supporting us at a ground level.
That is correct. Typically, our members, through their participation, are the largest contributor to our ability to execute these projects.
Right. So if you're out there on Lake Lanier and you've been enjoying this for a long time, you don't even have to be a property owner. We'd love to have you join with us in that as a member of the Lake Lanier Association. Our annual meeting is going to be coming up this spring. As a part of that, we typically publish a lot of the data you're talking about for our annual financial report. So that'll be handed out and available for people to see.
It will. That'll be distributed. I've got to interrupt and go back. I left out one very important thing we do.
Sure.
And it's probably, for most people, one of the highest visibility, but that's shore sweep. Cleaning the trash up.
Oh, my word.
Lake. What was it, 85 tons last year?
It's been amazing.
Most
it's been
people,
between 80 tons and 100 tons for many years in a row, which is too darn many. It's aggravating that it's still there, but yeah.
In my simple mind, I'd like to think, oh, well, somebody just, accidentally blew out of the boat while they were driving down the lake. But it is amazing at how much we are able to remove from the lake and keep it clean. But my memory is it was 85 tons last year, 1,200 volunteers. And that is huge to me because you can imagine how the lake would look if we weren't able to gather up and dispose of all of that debris that's out there. So I missed that when I was talking about programs, and I want to make sure I didn't let that slip.
Absolutely. Well, and it is another great example of how important the Lake Lanier Association is to Lake Lanier, to everybody who utilizes Lake Lanier in any way, shape, or form. And again, how important it is that we have that membership base to work from. And we're looking to actually grow that membership base. We need some more folks to come on board with us.
That is correct.
So you can go to lakelanier.org, lakelanier.org, check out all the programs we're talking about, check out everything in there. We have a wide variety of levels of financial participation to be a member. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you can afford, every little bit of it helps to keep all of these various programs and everything that we do alive. And I hope you've figured out by now that we are incredibly accountable with every dime that comes in the door. That's what we do our best, right, Jeff?
That is correct.
Thank you for all you've done for us. Thank you for all you continue to do for us. And we'll look forward to a lot of exciting years working together here for the Lake Lanier Association.
Well, thank you. This has been I'm hesitant to say this is the best board I've ever worked on because there might be people out there from previous boards that say, oh, wait a minute. But this is one of the finest boards, and I really appreciate that I was given the opportunity to be a part of it. So thank you.
We're really grateful you're part of it as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to share this with your friends and neighbors, and be sure to go to lakelanier.org. Get signed up with us today. Thanks for joining us for Live on Lanier, brought to you by the Lake Lanier Association. Please feel free to share this podcast with your lake friends and neighbors. All previous episodes and even more lake-related videos are available on the Lake Lanier Association YouTube channel. We'd love to have your support as a member of the LLA. For more information on how to join and our various programs, just go to lakelanier.org. That's lakelanier.org. Be sure to join us next month for Live on Lanier.